Anything Goes with me, Becky Walsh, a modern-day agony aunt for some of your life questions and for some deep insights you just can't get from your friends. So we start the show by giving you some subjects that you might like to talk about, but you know, really anything goes. And the number to call is 033 33 403 700. Now, obviously, there's been a major sporting event taking place this evening, and I should know. I'm a huge sports fan. Who wrote this? Wales have played in the semi-final of the Euros, and in the heart of Cardiff we have Johann. But before we get stuck into the subjects, let's see what's happened in Cardiff and what the mood is like there. Hello guys. Hello chaps, can you hear me? Hello.
Hi Becky!
Hello, hello.
Hi.
I'm so sorry about what happened. But you must be absolutely gutted. What is the mood like there? We're talking about depression on the show, but what's the feel of the mood? How are people coping? What's been going on?
Well, actually, right now we're standing on St Mary Street, and the mood to me, it's still quite electric, but you know, Wales, this is the furthest Wales have got like ever really in football. Alex here went into the Principality Stadium to watch the match. Alex, how was it in the stadium?
Well, like you just said, the amazing thing was the atmosphere was absolutely incredible.
Really sorry for the swearing, guys. So sorry for that.
But do you know what I love? Despite the fact we were losing and we lost, the atmosphere was still amazing. People were still up for it. People were still cheering on. All I could do was bail chanting throughout the stadium. It was still amazing. I think people are just so chuffed that we've got this far, and it's just Wales. We love Wales. I mean, come on.
We
Alex
love it. I
is
think
really
that's
excited
brilliant,
there.
having that real positive attitude. I'm really excited for you to have that positive attitude. It was a huge event for Cardiff. It's been a huge event for Wales. I was thinking about changing my surname from Becky Walsh to Becky Welsh, but we never got round to that. I might have done it if you'd won.
Do it.
I might just do it still. But well done, guys. I think, you know, you've done so well to get so far. And I think that that's just really great about the Welsh spirit. I think that's so great. Thank you very much, guys. Thanks for coming in and taking part in the show. Well done. I'll let you go because it looks like there's a crazy party going on back there. Have a really fantastic night. All right, you take care. Thanks so much. I feel like saying commiserations, but it's not really commiserations, is it? Because you've got that Welsh spirit just carrying on, going on through all of that. But on the show tonight, we are talking about overcoming depression. Maybe we all need to become Welsh. We're going to be joined by Psychologies magazine Life Lab blogger Vanessa Anstee. She's amazing. We're going to be also asking questions about addiction. Have we been getting the way that we treat addicts all wrong? We talked to Johann Hari, who is the author of Chasing the Scream, The First and Last Days of the War on Drugs. Now, his TED Talk, Everything You Think About Addiction Is Wrong, is one of the top 100 most watched TED Talks. And there was a reason for that, and we're going to be talking to him about that too. Now, I don't know if you've ever had a one-night stand, but sometimes they can be a little bit rubbish. But we're going to be saying how to have a one-night stand, but you never have to have again because you're that good that they always want to come back for more. But tonight I'm an agony aunt who needs your help. That sounds a little bit strange, doesn't it? Well, I'll tell you why. I booked an expert guest in for the show about depression, but yesterday she had to pull out. But there's a thing about emotional well-being. 1 minute you feel like you can take on the world, and then the next minute it might be even something as small as your football team or as big as your football team loses, and then you suddenly are down in the dumps and a cloud descends and you feel a bit rubbish. Now, I'm not an expert on depression. I'm one of those really annoying, positive people. Maybe I am slightly Welsh. I'm maybe one of those very positive people. In fact, people actually call me Bubbly Becky. Well, sometimes they call me Busty Bubbly Becky, but now I'm just seriously showing off. So, what can you tell us about depression? What has worked for you? And what should we not say? And what should we say? I want you to tell us all about it. You are going to be the expert on tonight's show. So tell us what you think. The number to ring 033 33 403 700. Now, joining me now on the phone is Vanessa Anstee. Hi, Vanessa. How are you?
I'm great, thanks, Becky. How
Brilliant.
Are you?
Excellent. Now, Vanessa, you are a life coach. You're also a personal friend of mine. And I've got you on the call so that we can have a bit of a chat about how you and I support clients with depression, but also the people who love them, because that's really important as well. So I guess this is a strange question, but why is it that people actually get depressed?
you know what? It's funny because I actually wonder if it is a strange question, because it kind of sends us to there must be an answer, like actually they shouldn't get depressed. And I think that kind of sends us down this rabbit hole of thinking, whereas actually what if we just flipped it a little bit and said, well, some people do get depressed, and when they are depressed, what happens? And I think then that kind of points us to, well, in my experience, when you're in that place of that negative spiral, that, you know, people are focusing on, they're overwhelmed by emotions, they're focusing on what's outside of their control, you know, they're getting caught in negative what-ifing spirals. And, you know, and often it's that kind of thing of where they're not necessarily taking care of some of the really basic needs, like, you know, they're not sleeping great, they're not necessarily exercising, they're not doing things to really help themselves in that situation. And I think that for me is the area to kind of look at first, like what's actually going on.
I think you're right there. And I love what you've said, actually, because when you're sort of saying that idea of making yourself wrong about it, so to say there's something wrong with me, and yet, you know what, the earth goes into winter, the leaves fall off, you know, we don't kind of say, oh, what's wrong with the trees? They're looking really sad and depressed. We all have seasons. And I think that sometimes when we go into kind of like more reflective places, we kind of suppress sadness or reflection or even our need for rest when we suppress all of those feelings because we think they're not normal, but actually what is normal? So in a way, how would you say that people can recognise this, the feelings coming up, and perhaps can recognise that and do something, not really, I don't want to say do something about it, but when you're talking about taking care of themselves. So I'll give you an example of this. I'm a complete rat bag. If I'm cold, hungry or tired, I certainly learn to embrace my inner bitch. Okay, it's like I just become a real horrible person. So I know, take a cardie with me, have a snack in a bag, you know, and make sure that I've had plenty of sleep before I rip somebody's head off. So what can people do to kind of take care of themselves if they feel that dark cloud descending?
Yeah, it's actually what you said, you know, that there's the acronym HALT, which is, you know, am I hungry, am I angry, am I lonely, am I tired, you know, like...
Can you run by those again? Am I hungry, am I angry, am I lonely, am I tired?
Lonely, or am I tired? Yeah.
I've never heard that before. What?
No, I hadn't. A mate of mine who does some work around depression had said it to me, and he said, you know, it's one of the things to just check in. And I've got a teenage daughter, and I know exactly, if she's hungry, oh my goodness. So it's like, you know, actually that's the first... And I kind of like that because it's something to help you or me or anyone, you know, kind of check in, like, oh, what's actually going on? Because I think for me, I don't necessarily know until I've kind of bumped into something, like, oh, wow, suddenly I'm feeling really like the clouds descending, or, you know, and I think it's, you know, for me, a lot of the time it's actually not necessarily checking with my mind, but also checking with my body, you know, what's going on? Am I feeling heavy? I noticed, like, with clients, they'll often kind of describe, oh, I feel really stuck, and you go, well, what does that feel like? And they go, well, it feels like, you know, I'm in some kind of cage, or, you know, I'm feeling really heavy, or I'm in a bog, or whatever. And I think sometimes just our bodies actually know, you know, if we've lost our appetite, if we suddenly gained a huge appetite, if we're suddenly binge watching loads of Orange is the New Black or something, I don't know, you know, whatever your thing is.
Or craving chips.
Yes,
just like sudden sugar cravings, craving chips, that kind of thing. You know, those things really do come up. And I love what you say about feeling heavy, because I always advise people and I say, follow what lights you up. Like, follow what makes you feel light. Like, if a thought comes into your head and it feels light or exciting or expansive, follow it, you know, rather than, but then always we don't tangibly go for those things, because then we come in with the second thought of, well, what if I do that and it goes wrong? Or what if this happens and it doesn't work out? So we don't end up following what's light.
And I think we get in that paralysis, don't we, of like that kind of analysis paralysis, when we're really, really stuck and we think that the answer's coming from our mind. So we turn over every possibility, and it seems like every direction that you look, it kind of just takes you back to where you are. And I think, you know, there's that feeling of like, oh God, it's just so hopeless, or, you know, I can't cope, or whatever it is.
And what's wrong with me?
Exactly. Yeah. You know, and it's only me that's feeling this, you know. So I think shame has a big link in there as well, because, you know, we don't necessarily want to be vulnerable and necessarily open that up, because we're thinking, oh, something's wrong.
Absolutely. Hey, Vanessa, we've got like 1 more minute to go before we have to go to an ad break. What really quick tips could you give us for anybody who's kind of like feeling like that? Have you got any, just to put you on the spot, any quick things you can throw at us?
Well, I would say definitely look at things like what's going on physically. So, how are you managing your health? Are you exercising? Like, exercise is massive. Get out in nature is a big thing. I saw on the BBC that was talking about actually nature is the next antidepressant.
I totally agree with you. Nature is the world's best antidepressant. Thank you so much, Vanessa. I'm sorry we didn't get more time. You've been amazing. So we're going to be taking your calls after the break. We want you to be able to phone in. Talk to us about what tips and advice you have got. You probably know more than I do. So give us a call, 033 33 403 700, and we will be back right after this. Welcome back to Anything Goes with me, Becky Walsh. Coming up, have we been getting addictions all wrong? But first of all, we had a tweet come in, so I'm just going to read that to you now. I'm intrigued, but it's from Sheila. I'm intrigued. Are you in a relationship yourself, and how do you keep it saucy? Well, Sheila, are you asking me out on a date? Are you in a relationship yourself? Okay, so I wrote lots of books on relationships, so I did a hell of a lot of research, some of it practical, some of it emotional, and some of it physical. I wrote a book called Intuitive Lovers, and I also wrote a book called Cupcakes and Coffee, which is a little saucy in itself because it's kind of like an erotic fiction book that has a self-love ending, because I wanted to write a book on self-love. So that's what that was all about. So how you can keep relationships saucy, I think it's all about playing dynamics and roles. So you may not be able to see, but I have got some Vanessa Anstee shoes on at the moment. Now, the sexy shoes are very deliberate. If you think about the Spice Girls, now the music was quite good, but it wasn't that good, just saying. But they all played different archetypes. So you had Baby Spice, which is a little bit of a virgin, and then you had Scary Spice, which is probably a little bit dominatrixy. Then you had Sporty Spice, who was like one of the lads. And then you had Ginger Spice, kind of sort of like the easy girl. No wonder she left the band, let's face it. And then, of course, you had Posh Spice, who was the girl who would say no, 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 but then finally break under seduction. Now, what's good is that I'm Every Woman, It's All in Me. We have all of these different archetypes all inside of every woman, and a lot more than that. Now, every woman is looking for a man that can kind of pull out all of these different archetypes so that she gets to play them in the bedroom. So if you think about it, if you can get a guy, we change archetypes with pairs of shoes. You put on a big 6-inch heel and suddenly you're Scary Spice. You put on a pair of pumps and suddenly you're Baby Spice. So we get to be able to play all of these roles. Now, when you play them in the bedroom, we're literally looking at the difference between perhaps being a very active person or a very submissive person. But that's how you can keep a relationship really spicy. It's just seeing yourself in different archetypes. And it's a really good way of keeping a man faithful as well. Because I believe a man only strays when he's looking at different women and kind of like thinking, oh, there's a bit of Baby Spice. Oh, there's a bit of Scary Spice. But when you play all of those women, because we naturally are all of those women, we tend to get more loyalty out of our man as well. So that's good. We've got Laura on the line. Hello, Laura. How are you?
Hello, I'm fine. How are you?
I'm brilliant. Thank you for calling your show. What made you ring in? What can we do? What are your thoughts?
Well, I suffered with peri and postnatal depression with both my children. So I was ringing about that, really, about the fact that I really think that we need to speak more about mental health issues and really break the taboo out of the fact that so many people, the moment I said I had, postnatal depression, went, "Ooh, me too. I'm not alone. What?" It's kind of, we need to break down the fact and make it no longer the dirty little secret.
Do you know, and I think that's so important because there can be that taboo of, well, what does that say about me as a mother? Does it say I didn't want my child? Does it say I'm incapable of loving? All of that kind of stuff. And also there's a lot of bonding. Laura, can I ask you about the birthing process for you? How was birth for you? I mean, not your own birth, you might not remember it. Go on.
Well, no, I was there, apparently. I had extreme morning sickness with both pregnancies, which only became a real thing when Kate Middleton had it, obviously. Yeah. And I was actually lighter giving birth than when I found out I was pregnant. Whoa. And both my children were quite, I think Jack was around 7 pounds and Poppy was 8 something. Right. So I was small, and I'm 5 foot, but I'm not a small girl. Yeah, yeah. And it was I was really ill, so I was induced with both of them, and it took quite quickly with both of them.
Yeah.
Jack's, being blunt, Becky, I was drugged up to the nines with Jack.
Yeah.
And with Poppy, nobody believed that my labour could go that quickly.
Wow.
And I think I had half a paracetamol before the midwife went, "Oh, let's get you upstairs." And I was like, I told you.
Yeah, I did.
So the birth was... But I had minor PTS after Poppy's birth, but minor.
Yeah.
With flashbacks, and it was more encompassed into the postnatal.
Is there any link? Now, I don't know about this medically, so I'm just putting two and two together here. Do you think that there's some kind of like link between maybe the nutrition that you need in your body in order to be able to, because there's definite things like we were just talking earlier with Vanessa about the idea that, you know, if you haven't eaten well or if you haven't had enough nutrients or even sugar crashes, that can have an emotional response to it. Have you thought about whether or not there was a link there as well with really not being able to hold food down and feeling sick?
Definitely. I have a serotonin imbalance in my brain. Oh. If I put it black and white nowadays, rather than putting emotion on it, I've got a serotonin imbalance. Yeah. And if I don't take, nowadays it's my tablet, but back then if I guess I couldn't eat properly, I wasn't getting the nutrients in that would is probably the wrong word, but cover the symptoms that I probably had for a while before I had the children, but were completely heightened by the inability to eat, the hospital trips, because I was on drips once a month because I was horrendous. Yeah, right. I laugh now. But,
and do you laugh now? Like, I mean, that's a kind of crazy, but do you laugh now, Laura? I mean, do you ever worry about the depression coming back, or is it something that, is it literally, it was isolated around the childbirth that made it particularly difficult? And how are you now?
I still have it. I think that it's probably a bit of a cliche. I always think I will. You know, it's a chemical imbalance. I think it was re-triggered with childbirth, and I think that I will probably always be on my medication. And I don't see that as a weak thing, because you wouldn't ask a diabetic to come off insulin.
Agreed.
It's still a chemical.
In fact, that's something I actually heard from Ruby Wax. She said exactly the same thing, and I thought that was a really powerful message.
It's true.
Thank you so much, Laura. Thank you very much for calling in and giving your opinion on that. And I'm really pleased, because you're right, this is a subject that people need to be talking about, and sadly we don't get to do that enough. Thank you ever so much, Laura. Thanks for your call. We've got someone else on the call now. We've got Paul, who's on the phone. Hi, Paul. How are you?
Hi, Becky. Not too bad. Better than I have been, that's for sure.
Yeah. It's an interesting subject tonight, isn't it? What made you call in?
Well, over the last few years, probably going back about 8 years, I was suffering from stress at work. Things got worse. I was on medication. Home life was going bad. I was medicating with alcohol. And eventually I ended up handing my notice in at work. Myself and my wife split up. And this was about 2 years ago. And now I've got a much better relationship with my wife. We are going through the divorce process, but we've got a better relationship than we've had for years. I've got a new job. Everything's going fine. I've got a fantastic relationship with my wife.
How did you turn it around, Paul? How did you actually turn that around? Because literally what you're describing to me there is, I lost my job, I lost my wife, that probably involves losing a home. That is huge. I mean, you're talking about some really big things, all through the fact that you were stressed within your job. I mean, these are incredibly big, life-changing events, and yet I can hear that you are being so positive. You're talking very positively about your relationship with your now ex-wife. You're talking very positively about the new job. How did you do that? What turned it around for you?
I was at a place where I just didn't want to come out of the bedroom. The idea of looking for new work was just abhorrent. I had no wish to do it whatsoever. And I knew it was wrong. I went to the doctors, and I was put in touch with, in Gateshead, the mental health team, and I went to a place called Talking Therapies and had CBT. And basically it was...
Now, for those people who don't know, that's cognitive behavioural therapy, CBT. Sorry, Paul, carry on.
Yes. Basically, for myself, it was... I was having to put myself and do things that I didn't want to do. instead of backing away from the world, I had to go out and face the world. And that's what the CBT was more or less encouraging me to do. And it has taken time.
Yeah.
But there is a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah. I think like everything, we tend to isolate people who are depressed or who are addicted. We tend to sort of isolate them. And I think that CBT is a really great therapy because it really makes you start to like look at things and sort of see that actually connection is the way forward, to actually be able to connect within a job, to connect with people. But of course, there is that hurdle of having to be brave when something has hurt you so badly. You just want to crawl under the duvet and just not have to deal with it again. So I'm impressed, Paul. I'm impressed that you've done so well to be able to move forward in your life like that. That's really good. I'm going to ask you, I'm going to put you on the spot, but what one piece of advice do you think that you would give someone who has been in your past situation? What would you say to them?
Right. I would probably say seek medical advice.
Yeah.
You must go and see your doctor.
Yeah.
Because you tend to hide away because of what it is. And certainly, I mean, I was a supermarket manager, and the stress just goes along with that.
It really
all
does.
the time.
Paul, we're running out of time. I'm really sorry. Otherwise, I'd love you to talk about that, but we're running out of time. But thank you anyway. And like he says, seek help. Don't do it on your own. That's really important. Give us a call, 033 33 403 700. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back to Anything Goes with me, Becky Walsh. Now, let's not waste any more time because this has been a very popular show this evening and we've got lots of calls to get through, so we'll get straight onto the phones now. We've got John on the line. Hi, John.
Hi, Becky. How are you?
I'm very good. What made you call in the show?
Well, I heard you were talking about depression.
Yeah, and is this something you've experienced yourself?
Yes, in my mid-20s.
Okay, and so tell us a bit about your story. What happened to you?
Until I was 26, I was hardworking, very successful academically and professionally, and then I felt completely stuck, and I was suicidal before I was diagnosed,
wow.
Which I believe is quite common.
Yeah.
And I didn't know anything about it. Well, actually, all I knew was a few people from my school had committed suicide.
Wow.
But for me, it was all a complete surprise. So then I went into the medical system where they started giving me drugs and psychotherapy and talking about electroconvulsive shock therapy.
Wow. So, when you think about that, we look at that as being kind of really the very far end of it being very serious. For that kind, I mean, you just think, and it just blows your mind to kind of like think about those kinds of therapies seem so intense. You sound like, like you're out of the other side. What did you do?
Yeah.
What changed?
Well, I politely declined the electrodes on the brain, but I did all the rest. I did the therapy and the drugs.
Yeah. Yeah. And did they work?
No. Well, the drugs basically numbed me for a year and stopped me jumping off buildings. The therapy was the classic, Freudian one, lie on the couch and man with beard and all that. That identified some problems but didn't solve them.
Okay.
So essentially I had to start looking for solutions for myself.
Yeah. And what did you find as a solution? Where did you go for that?
Well, I tried all kinds of things. What happened in the end was I learnt mindfulness meditation by accident.
How could you learn it by accident? I was zoning out one day while staring at a flower and breathing. What happened?
Well, do you want to know? How that happened?
Sure, yeah.
So what happened was, I'm sure lots of your listeners have heard of a book called The Power of Now.
Yeah.
Well, this was the year before that was published.
Yeah.
Yeah, Eckhart Tolle. Yeah. So this was the year before that was published, so it kind of wasn't in the public domain. But I was reading this book about how to trade futures and options, bizarrely, because I'd worked in a bank, and I thought, oh, maybe I'll do that. I was basically running a business which had stopped completely in Paris. And so I started following this course, and in the middle of the course, this American guy said, well, all this technical analysis is fine, but what really matters is your state of mind.
Yeah.
And then he'd written this novel, and I read the novel, and he kept talking about now knows, return to now. And I basically started doing this little exercise where you stop thinking and just keep bringing your attention back to your breath.
Yeah.
And then my life started to change very, very fast. And a few months later, I realised, oh, that was mindfulness. You learned it by accident.
Wow, how interesting. Because
I didn't know what it was.
I mean, that's something, again, I'm talking a lot about Ruby Wax tonight, but that's something that Ruby Wax says is a really good thing to do. Can you just explain exactly what mindfulness is? For, like, could you give a mindfulness technique for anyone who wants to use it?
Yeah, this is the very, very simplest version. The very, very simplest version is, so most of us are distracted by our thoughts all the time. In fact, some people think that they are their thoughts because they keep happening.
And you're the thinker of your thoughts.
Sorry?
You're the thinker of your thoughts.
Yeah, but, because we have a constant stream of them, they seem very real. And so the exercise is incredibly simple. All you do, the simplest way to do it is you sit still on a chair with your eyes closed, and you just place your attention on your breath as it flows in and out. And every time your breath wanders, you just bring it back to the breath. You don't judge yourself. You just notice the mind has wandered. I'm going to bring my attention back to my breath. And if you keep doing that over and over again throughout the day, after a while, the mind gradually starts to give up.
So it's almost like a breath, fish and chips, breath, fish and chips, breath, arm wrestle. This is all getting a bit autobiographical,
every time you realise your mind has wandered, you bring it back,
Yeah.
And then what happens is, the kind of number of thoughts you have per second, after a while it starts to diminish.
Yeah.
And then all kinds of amazing things start to happen after that.
Brilliant. John, thank you so much. You've given a really good piece of advice and wisdom there it's a really good tip, that, and one that we know works. Thank you, John, for your call. We have Harvey on the line. Hi, Harvey.
Hello, Becky. How are you?
I'm all right. What made you call the show?
Well, I was just watching, hearing people stories about depression, and it's not as serious as a lot of what I've heard from the other people. But the only thing that I ever tend to really get upset about, which is, I say in all seriousness, is how much I miss my dog from home. I'm a student living away at university, and I feel like I can call my family at home, and I can't call him.
Yeah.
And it makes me quite. It's the only thing that I really ever get upset about, and I feel like there might be quite a lot. There's a lot of people that love their pets just as much as I do.
Yeah.
It's a struggle.
It is a struggle. I mean, I'm a dog owner myself, and I even miss her when I just come here and I don't bring her with me. I miss her when I go shopping. So I can't even imagine what it's like to be pulled apart. But also, I think that what people don't understand, perhaps that don't have pets, and that pet could be a rabbit or a cat or anything like that. It's not just an emotional bond that you have. As human beings, we need to have companionship. And Harvey, I can imagine you taking like walks with the dog where you go and clear your mind.
Every day.
Yeah, and all of those open vistas where you're walking across a field and you're chucking a stick, and it's just so beautiful. And I'm sorry, because it is really hard. And I know that there's all of these interesting apps that are out at the moment where you can communicate with your dog and then a treat is released, but it's not the same. And I understand
I just don't think
that.
That's not the same. That's not the same for him either, I don't think. And I think it would just make me a bit more sad. I mean, his name is Wilfred. I've had him since he was 6 weeks old, and he's now 11, and I'm now 20. And I spent like the whole of my going through teenage years growing up and becoming who I am with him, and now it's
I mean, I know it's
difficult. I kind of feel like we're both growing up together.
Yeah, and you really have. I mean, and that's very literal. I mean, I also think, when you're a student and you're living in shared houses, and also, estate agents actually tell landlords to say that pets aren't allowed, which I think is outrageous. But I just think if there's any way in which you can have your pet with you there a chunk of the time while you're away, I would do it.
I would love to have him, but you couldn't stay here permanently. It wouldn't be a very fair environment.
No, it wouldn't. But even if it was just like a few weeks or a month or something like that, just to kind of break it up a little bit. But I think that, when you are missing, we tend to torture ourselves with our thoughts. So when we're longing for somebody, a person, a pet, whatever it is, whenever we've lost somebody especially, we torture ourselves with our thoughts. We replay things in our mind, and we get triggered by guilt, and we think about how they're feeling, and all of that stuff comes up.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. I think the guilt is the biggest part of
it is.
Of why I feel so
even
sad
me
about
sitting here and she's at home. So the thing is firstly, be kind to yourself. don't make up stories in your mind that creates guilt. So there's things that you don't know. So you don't know whether or not, you know, your dog's on the beach having a really wonderful time. So we make up stories in our head, and we make up stories that create pain. So try and keep the missing really simple, which is I will be with my dog again one day, and I can't do anything about this because my future depends on this education, and I'm having to balance these two things, and I forgive myself for it. And that's the best thing that you can do, because otherwise you're just going to really, this could cause you to not be concentrating in your education. And I think it's really important that you just be kind to yourself as much as you can, and make sure that you've eaten as well, because that makes your emotions 10 times worse if you haven't got a full stomach.
I eat all the time, it's okay.
Brilliant.
No problem.
Harvey, do you know, I'm really delighted that you phoned and shared that, because I think it's a really important thing that's often overlooked, because people think, you know, oh, it's only a pet and people are going to think I'm stupid when they've lost a child or something. But it's not only a pet. I totally understand that myself, being a dog lover. Thank you so much for your call, Harvey. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Becky.
You're really welcome. Good to talk to you. Good to talk to you. Oh, God, Harvey's calls kind of touched me. I kind of feel like I want to go home now and see my dog. Do you know, sometimes I'll actually be out in the pub and I'll kind of go, yeah, I'd prefer to be home with my dog. So I only go to pubs that allow pets. Okay, so I've got a text that has come in from Ben. It says to keep calm, taking 5 minutes out of your day just to relax is really good, and taking deep breaths really helps me. Brilliant advice, Ben. Absolutely brilliant advice. Certainly before I go in and do this show where my nerves are all coming up, I definitely take a few good deep breaths, and it really helps you relax. It gets oxygen to the brain, which is a very good thing, and it really makes your body just kind of like go into a place of stillness. So I'm really glad that you've shared this with us. This has been amazing, guys. We're getting so much great advice that is coming in from you, which is ace. I almost feel like I could retire and just you know, chillax whilst this is all taking place. Apart from, I like to be able to kind of like put all of these things together, so that's not so bad. Now, we are going to be talking to Johann Hari. Now, are you a fan of the TED talks? They are brilliant, aren't they? He is in the top 100 TED speakers, so you're going to be able to get to have a listen to his brain and what he thinks about addiction coming up after the break. But there is still time for your call. If you want to ring in, the number to ring is 033 33 403 700. You can email becky@madetelevision.tv and text with Becky 88833. So we're going into a break now. We're coming back and we're going to be talking to Johann Hari. He also used to write for The Independent too for about 19 years, if you're wondering where you know that name from. So we're going to come back after the break. We'll be with you back very shortly. Welcome back. I'm Becky Walsh, solving some large life issues and some small niggles. No problem is too big and no problem is too small. I'll be taking your calls and you can join the conversation on 033 33 403 700. Now, I'm really excited to speak to this guy. This is Johann Hari. His TED Talk is in one of the top 100 most viewed, and he also did a narration for a little animation on addiction, and that one went viral. So you might have seen those things while you've been pottering around the internet, and this is the guy that we're going to be talking to now. Now, I have linked up those things on Facebook. If you haven't seen them, they're on the Facebook group. They're also on Twitter underneath the hashtag #CallBecky. Hi, Johann.
Hey, Becky. Good to be with you.
Yeah, good to be with you as well. I loved your talk on TED. I thought it was fabulous.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. My publishers will shoot me if I don't point out that it's taken from my book, which is called Chasing the Scream, The First and Last Days of the War on Drugs.
Don't you worry. I got that in there right at the top of the show. I wouldn't. As a fellow author, I know how important that is, so don't worry about it.
Every time I don't do that.
No, that's perfectly fine. Now, I'm going to share a little story with you that is something that I don't really talk about very much, but I think it leads us in to really nicely to talking about addiction and why we might be getting addiction all wrong. When I was in my early 20s, I had a drug-addicted boyfriend who systematically, he kind of tried to get me addicted to crack and heroin. And he even confessed this, that he thought it would be able to turn me into a cash cow for his habit. And you can imagine what the job was going to be. Now, I was a bit curious and naive, and that could have been a deadly combination. But I didn't get addicted. Now, he was addicted. I didn't get addicted, even though he tried to almost like use it as a prescription drug and had me taking it every other day for about 2 weeks. Now, the story that we are told is that all drugs are addictive, especially crack. You just have to take it once and that's it, you're done, it's addictive. So how come I and other people like me do not get addicted from your experience?
It's so interesting, and I think you're totally right. It made me think about, I had a boyfriend who had a similar, although he didn't try to get me addicted, I had a boyfriend who had a similar crack and heroin problem. And one of the reasons I was interested in this is because one of my earliest memories is trying to wake up one of my relatives and not being able to. And I didn't understand why then, because I was too young. But as I got older, I realised we had...
Oh, don't tell me, Scope.
Drug addiction.
Scope's nearly dropping out there. So yeah, carry on with what you were saying and hopefully we've got you back. Yes, we've got you back. Carry on.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we've got you.
Yeah. I was talking about, one of my earliest memories is of trying to wake up one of my relatives and not being able to. But we had addiction in my family. And one of the reasons I wrote a book about this is because I realised, I didn't understand what had caused the addiction that I'd seen in so many people that I knew. And it really it was one of the things that most surprised me, actually, that addiction is really not what we think it is. If you had asked me at the start what causes, say, heroin addiction, to choose one of the drugs you talked about, I would have looked at you like you were an idiot, and I would have said, well, obviously the clue's in the name, right? Heroin addiction is caused by heroin. We've been told this story about addiction that for 100 years now, that's become part of our common sense. It was basically what I thought caused addiction. And it's basically that addiction is caused by chemical hooks inside the drug itself. So we think that if you grab the next 20 people to walk past your studio off the street and we injected them all with heroin for a month every day, at the end of it, they'd all be heroin addicts. Because, as I say, there are chemical hooks in the drug that their bodies would start to desperately physically need. So just like your experience with your boyfriend, if you believe that theory, you should have ended that period as a drug addict. You didn't. And your experience is not that unusual. The first thing that alerted me to the fact there's something weird about this kind of chemical hook story is when it was explained to me. In Britain, after we speak, if you or me step out into the street and we get hit by a truck and you break your hip or I break my hip, we'll be taken to hospital and we'll be given loads of a drug called diamorphine for the pain. Diamorphine is heroin. It's just the medical name for heroin, right?
And it's like cleaner than the stuff you're going to buy on the street.
Much stronger than the stuff off the street, because when you buy it, the stuff your ex or my ex was using was about 5 to 20% actually heroin, and the rest just cut stuff. Not the drug. So obviously, what you get from the doctor is 100% the pure stuff, right? If what we think about addiction is right, what should happen to all these people who have been given heroin the whole time in hospitals? A significant number of them should become addicted. This has been studied very carefully. It virtually never happens. You'll notice your nan wasn't turned into a junkie when she had a hip replacement operation, even though she was, in fact, given lots of heroin. And when I learned that, it just seemed so weird and so contrary to everything I've been told that even though the science behind it is completely robust, I found it almost impossible to believe until I went and interviewed an amazing man who I know you've talked to as well, Professor Bruce Alexander. I went to Vancouver to see him. He's a professor of psychology. And he did an experiment that I think really helps us to understand this, and then we can look at the places that have thought about addiction differently because of this. He explained to me, this idea we have in our heads about addiction being caused by chemical hooks comes partly from a series of experiments that were done earlier in the 20th century. They're really simple experiments. Anyone watching this can try it at home if you feel a little bit sadistic. You get a rat and you put it in a cage, and you give it 2 water bottles. One is just water, and the other is water laced with either heroin or cocaine. If you do that, the rat will almost always prefer the drugged water and almost always kill itself quite quickly. There was a famous advert in America warning about drugs about this. Some of your viewers might have seen it. It's on YouTube, where it shows the dead rat at the end and it says something like, it could happen to you. And of course, that totally fits with our understanding of addiction. But in the 1970s, Professor Alexander came along and looked at these experiments and said, well, hang on a minute. We're putting this rat in an empty cage alone with nothing to do except use the drugs. What would happen if we did this differently? So he built a cage that he called Rat Park, which is basically like heaven for rats, right? Anything a rat can want in life is there in Rat Park. It's got cheese, it's got coloured balls, it's got tunnels, it's got loads of friends, it can have loads of sex, and it's got both the water bottles, the normal water and the drugged water. And of course they try both because they don't know what's in them. This is the fascinating thing. In Rat Park, they don't like the drugged water. They almost never use them. None of them ever use them compulsively. None of them ever overdose. So you go from almost 100% compulsive use and overdose when they have really bad lives to almost none, in fact, when they have really good lives. And I think that tells us something really fundamental about addiction. I can't actually see you, but I'm guessing that wherever you are, you've got in front of you like a cup of coffee, a glass of water. I've got a bottle of expensive, ridiculously overpriced smart water here. Totally forget the drug laws, forget all of that. Totally legally, you and I could both have bottles of vodka here in front of us, right?
Yeah.
We could both be drinking vodka now. In fact, you and I probably got enough money, we could drink vodka for the next month. We wouldn't end up homeless, right? Yeah. We're not going to do that. And the reason we're not going to do that is not because anyone's stopping us. It's because we want to be present in our lives.
Yeah, and we want to be happy. So,
Exactly.
So let me just ask you, because we're running out of time now, there's one big question that I really want to ask you, and I don't even know if you can answer this. But really, it is a massive question. It sounds to us like we are definitely not living in Rat Park. We are living in society that seems to propagate our need for addiction. So what do you think we need to change in our society if we were to turn this around so that we didn't have so many addicts? And we can be addicted to anything, and that includes money and people in high-rise blocks looking down on homeless, addicted people going, ha, 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 well, at least I'm not like them, but I'm putting all of these other people in a similar situation of a rat cage. So what is it that we need to change in our society to actually change our thoughts and have less addicts in the world, do you think? Big question, sorry.
Crucial thing to say about that is that it's not an abstract question. There are places that looked at the evidence from Rat Park and acted on them. In the year 2000, Portugal had one of the worst drug problems in Europe. 1% of the population was addicted to heroin. And every year they tried the American way of locking them up, imprisoning more people. And every year the problem got worse until in the end they set up a panel of scientists to look at the evidence, including the evidence from Rat Park. And it came back and said, decriminalise all drugs, from cannabis to crack. But, and this is the crucial next step, take all the money we used to spend on making addicts' lives worse, punishing them, shaming them, stigmatising them, imprisoning them, and spend all that money instead on turning their lives around.
Getting them jobs, getting them kind of homes, looking after them.
Exactly. It's not what we're told to think of as drug treatment. It's not rehab. That actually has an appalling success rate. What it is about exactly, say you used to be a mechanic and you've got a smack problem. They'll go to a garage and they'll say, if you employ this guy for a year...
He's going to rip you off, he's going to sell all your stuff, you're going to, because he's got a drug problem, he'll relapse. So, of course, then that person gets excluded from society and doesn't reconnect. I'm going to have to wrap it up, but I can see where we're going with this. And I have to say that your TED Talk is out there, your book is out there, the addiction thing. I'm going to link to all of that so that people can get to hear this really important work. Thank you so much for being able to be on the call with us, Johann. Really appreciate your work. I think you're amazing. So thank you so much. All right, you take care. Bye-bye.
My friend didn't succeed in his nefarious plans.
Absolutely. No, I know. I'm pleased too. And actually, he's cleaned himself up and he's doing really well in life. So it does have a happy ending. If you want to know more about Rat Park, you can hear my interview with Bruce Alexander on my podcast, Idea Sex, which you can find on iTunes. This has been an amazing show. My God, we've been so busy. We talked to Harvey, who's missing his dog. We talked to Paul about positive steps, about depression, and we talked to Laura about postnatal depression. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. We'll be catching you again next week. I'll put all of the links on our social media and you'll be able to catch up with all of those. We'll catch you again next week.